Sakshi Ratedu. Buenas tardes a todos. Nare Lab Shadye, or Xóchitl Flores-Marcial. I am Xóchitl Flores-Marcial, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the Getty and all the organizers at Cal State LA for having us all here today. I'm going to moderate the discussion, so I would like to invite all of today's speakers to please join me so we can begin conversing. I would like to give a little bit of time to something that a colleague at UNAM wrote and sent. He said this, and it's in Nahuatl. I'll tell you what it says in English in a second. Ashan otla huelkia pampa in tlaloque, sempaquilispa, omitzmoselili, temachticatzintli, ma cuali otzintli, Miguel León-Portilla, nican ok titequiti ticate inik, amo poliwis, tomasewala totzin. It rained so much today. The Tlaloques received you with infinite happiness, surely. May your journey be good, dear teacher, Miguel León-Portilla. Here we will continue working so that our Nahuatl languages do not perish. And this is a message from my colleague at UNAM, historian Baruch Martinez-Diaz, who is a native speaker of Nahuatl. I would like to start this conversation by returning to a seed that was planted by Eduardo de la Cruz. Quisiera empezar esta conversación con una semilla que sembró nuestro compañero Eduardo de la Cruz cuando dijo que los pueblos indígenas deberían de tener acceso a estos espacios, puesto a que los documentos históricos son de sus historias y están escritos en sus idiomas. He planted the seed that all of this marvelous research that we're producing, that we're sharing, that it comes from indigenous communities, and that somehow this new knowledge, these new findings that all of these wonderful scholars are producing should reach those communities, and what great benefit this would be to our communities, to the indigenous youth who are still shamed for speaking indigenous language, for being indigenous, or for associating, having many different associations to indigeneity. So I would like to start, because I think that will begin a pretty lively conversation of perhaps the ways in which we are working and or the ways in which we plan to work with those communities that we are researching. For the panel first, I think. Thank you.
Pues yo tal vez, porque estamos haciendo la iniciativa, ¿no? Maybe I'll just talk a little bit what we are trying to do with our initiative, and we intentionally invited Eduardo to be part of this initiative from the get-go. Partially because many of us have studied in EDS with Eduardo and the other teachers there, and also because we wanted to find a way to bring our research not only to the scholarly community that we serve here at the Getty Research Institute and to sort of a general public in the US, and also a general public in Spanish-speaking countries and Mexico in particular. But we were very, sort of at the heart of it is also that we are thinking of the indigenous communities, Nahuatl communities in Mexico, where we all have had the great benefit of being able to study with some of these teachers. And so we intentionally invited Eduardo to come up with the summaries for each of the chapters for Book 12 so that, because the classical Nahuatl is significantly different from the Huastecan, Eastern Huastecan Nahuatl that he speaks in his community. And so to modern youths, it's difficult to read those texts. And so he created summaries of each chapter so that he could use it in his teaching. What we also did was that Eduardo came here 2 years ago, actually in the middle of the fires that we had here. And he was sitting in the auditorium, in our recording studio, and he read all the chapters in Book 12, and that we recorded them, and we plan to put them online as well as part of our digitized or digital Florentine Codex, where you can see the codex, you can read the transcriptions and translations, and you can also hear Eduardo read this text. So you have a sort of, una cercanía al idioma, ¿no? No sé si tú tal vez quieres decir algo de tu participación y cómo otra recepción de los resúmenes que hiciste.
Bueno, cuando empecé a trabajar aquí en el centro, yo también estuve como bloqueado, no conocía totalmente la historia de la conquista de México, pero cuando empecé a leer los pasajes totalmente en la lengua materna, fui viendo cosas que los profesores de la educación primaria básica me habían inculcado, que los indígenas se prestaron a la conquista, no se defendieron, pero cuando iba viendo los pasajes y haciendo los resúmenes era totalmente diferente de lo que los profesores me habían comentado. Y esta historia se repitió cuando los jóvenes de secundaria y TEBA les muestro pequeños resúmenes de estos pasajes, de estos capítulos del libro 12, y me decían, como lo dije en la presentación, oh, profesor Eduardo, ¿por qué no nos enseñan esto en la escuela? ¿Por qué no nos dan materiales de este tipo? Entonces creo que llegar esos materiales a los pueblos originarios realmente hay un impacto pues benéfico, positivo, y toman la iniciativa de retomar a hablar su lengua y de escribirlo y prácticamente pues hacer la práctica continua de sus costumbres. Entonces para mí es un gran satisfacción de que el grupo Getty me haya invitado, y todo lo que voy aprendiendo lo voy transmitiendo directamente a los pueblos originarios. Ahorita me estoy enfocando con algunos pueblos de Chicontepec, tal como iniciamos con el curso intensivo de náhuatl inglés, donde participan estudiantes de aquí de los Estados Unidos, que ellos han estudiado la lengua por 1, 2, 3 años, y ellos no quieren simplemente estudiarlo, sino también quieren conectarse directamente con los nativohablantes, y pues entonces se creó estos pequeños programas pilotos, donde hay este intercambio para los estudiantes, mejorar el habla del náhuatl con los niños indígenas, que ellos tienen que aprender el inglés. Entonces es un proyecto muy, muy bueno, y realmente varios colegas, compañeros investigadores y estudiantes participan para que esto realmente sea posible. Yo como subdirector de IDIES, director de IDIES, mi función es coordinar los proyectos, tratar de dar alojamiento a los instructores, y es un trabajo pues en grupo más que nada. Entonces simplemente quería comentarles y muchas gracias por haberme escuchado en mi lengua materna.
I'm going to summarize really briefly what Eduardo just said, and that is that from the beginning he was very excited to work on this project. He's thankful to the Getty for inviting him, and that as him going through his own education in elementary and secondary school, he did not have any of this information that he discovered as he was doing this very work that he is talking about now. And this is why he thought of this idea to interview students, because it would be important for him to understand what they were also learning. And it's been a learning process that has reminded him of the importance of having access to these documents, and ultimately him also producing materials that will be accessible by those very communities that he's trying to reach. That's a summary. I'm sorry.
I just also wanted to add that we have a large indigenous population of Mexico and Guatemala here in Los Angeles, and I think that we all have an opportunity to try and work more closely with grammar school teachers, elementary school teachers, high school teachers who oftentimes touch upon this material but also don't have a very strong background. And as Kevin Teresiano pointed out when we were working on a project with some elementary school teachers on the ancient world, there are far more children in Los Angeles who have a connection to Mesoamerica than Mesopotamia. So I think this is a real, I think that we also have a responsibility to reach out to those students who are facing multiple layers of discrimination for being native language speakers, perhaps being Spanish speakers, and who are really being pressured to assimilate to American culture.
I actually have a question for Berenice, because it was so great to hear your, I mean, we've talked about this issue of the translation philosophy and the different approaches that have been taken to the Florentine Codex, but it was really great to sort of see it, you know, plasmado allí, like very clearly laid out, and the different approaches so, you know, carefully picked out. And so as a translator, you with Federico at UNAM of Book 12, I am assuming that you are taking that more, this approach, and I love this sort of like not taking the sort of foreign language to you, but you being taken into this language, into this other language. How you are dealing with that for your translation of Book 12, and sort of maybe you could speak a little bit of those decisions you're making in that translation beyond sort of what you presented, and how that has been received, and how that also has changed maybe at your university, and sort of, you know, how does it fit into sort of the history of translation and sort of this project of translating the Florentine Codex from Spanish to Nahuatl?
Well, we are, as you could see,
From Nahuatl to Spanish, sorry.
as you could see, when I translate, I use this method of William Wright to segment the text for detecting the Nahuatl structures of discourse. And then this is a very good way to find these structures, and after that you can reach to a better translation with punctuation, no? And with Federico, we are trying to approach to these Nahuatl structures, and also to approach to this neological language that is in the Book 12 about of these new things that the Spaniards brought, no? So we are trying to do it, but I don't think that we are, how can we see, making a school, because in Mexico there are a lot of translators of Nahuatl text, some of them very good, and everyone translates according to their proper criteria. So we each other see the translations of the other, and I say, good and bad, and we keep doing what we think is the best. So that's our situation.
But you're also working and training a lot of students, so maybe you are creating a school of translation?
Maybe, but yeah, I have trained some students about translation studies theory and this method of translation of the Nahuatl, and now we are working in the translation of other Sagun texts, no? The Sermonarios de Sagun, and we are going to publish it soon, so let's see what we could achieve.
Something around that. Just to talk a little bit about translation, and Manuel Aguilar pointed very nicely of all the complications involving the Florentine Codex going to Europe, then of Book 12. And I want to say that Book 12, its Nahuatl text, has been translated, as you know here, by Berenice twice. Dibilan Anderson and Lockhart have translated it. The text we all use, it's the translation of either Lockhart or Dibble and Anderson, but unfortunately, really unfortunately, we don't have a Spanish translation of that Nahuatl text in Mexico. No, just talking about what you were also talking about and pointing, it's important, Eduardo, that the indigenous communities have this vision, but it is also important that the Mexicans have this vision, because it will change the way, like, we all think about conquest, the conquest, its histories. So we have a lot of responsibility with the initiative we're doing, the digital initiative. It's happening from here, but it's thanks to technology today, in a sense, it really will belong to anybody who wants to connect to that, and it's going to be very important.
I would like to continue this conversation. So many of the issues that were presented today are so tragic. And I think that a lot of the communities continue to suffer some of the very themes that we see in the Florentine Codex. So just as a matter of teaching, like, what can we take away as a collective, as a group, that we want everyone to leave with at least one thing today? What can we each one contribute to this? If each one of us left today with one thing, what is that?
I want to speak up on behalf of the images, and I think translating the text has taken a priority and is an ongoing effort. But one of the things that we have been doing in the last 2 to 3 years here at the Getty is looking at those 161 images with the idea that they are a third text that needs to be examined, deciphered, deconstructed as thoroughly, as rigorously as possible. And what it has revealed are these multiple layers that also, I think, demonstrate the resilience of indigenous peoples. So one of the things I would say to Eduardo and people interested in having a new approach, a new image of the conquest, is literally to show some of these images, like Tzilacatzin, who was a giant in the Tlatelolcan eyes. So this gives an indigenous community, all of us, the sense that these were heroes in their own right, and that people had tremendous pride, and that this was the 1570s, decades after the conquest. So I want to put in a good word for looking closely at the images, not just the text, as important as that ongoing work is. So.
Excellent. I also would echo that and encourage all educators that to seek out multiple perspectives. The Book 12 and the Florentine Codex, while the focus of this project is so important and immense, there are other indigenous histories. And please also read the Spanish chroniclers. Read how many different peoples are interpreting these events, because reading one history, even though as important as the Nahuatl text is, reading one history will only bring you a certain perspective. So seek out many and multiple.
Thank you. I guess what always strikes me when I see Book 12 and when I just like submerge in it is that when I approach it for the first time, I approach it through Cortés's letter, that were so intelligently constructed as a political tool to convince the king that he had these amazing lands and that he was going to be rich and that Cortés was the only one who could make it happen. No? So there it is, very elaborately thinking of that, and I was taught that that was a first eyewitness account without really thinking that it had this twist, this political twist, that they have an intent. And then I was struck by the fact that I was trying to find, because we always approach things with our previous ideas. We cannot do anything else. No, they are there. We don't know that we have this bias. So I started reading it, really looking for the voice of what León-Portilla had called the voice of the vanquished. And I really couldn't find the vanquished in that story. There was no complaint. The cosmos, the history of the cosmos, it's so huge, so big. We don't have control over that. That is what they're saying. We need to understand the true reasons of why this happened. And for them, the true reasons of why this happened is that they became a mestizo nation, a Nahua Christian nation. They were accepting their fate and trying to find a place in that new world without discrimination. So that is what, like, if we want to approach these voices, I think it is important to approach them knowing that we all have preconceived images, but to really listen to that, to really like re-educate ourselves, like Eduardo was saying. So that is, like, I invite you to go and look and read with this vision of, let me understand what these people really lived through, and in their own voice, and thank God we have it. That is what I would like to share from my own experience in really loving and respecting this book.
I feel like this is like the drink, you know, that's bringing it down. Yeah. I actually was thinking along the lines of what Rebecca was saying, and sort of keeping, in a way we're fetishizing the Florentine Codex. It totally bears fetishizing because there's still so much to do. And I mean, those of us who work on the Codex, there has been a lot of scholarship about it, so the question is, what new can you say about it? We think we are saying new things because we're reading the Spanish and the Nahua text and the images all together, and there's sort of like the comparisons that emerge. But we have this one incredible, rich document for the Nahua, or specifically the Mexica Nahua, for the Tlatelolcans and the Tenochcas. But in Mexico, there are 68 indigenous languages spoken. And in California, I think it's over 100 indigenous languages. And if you think about all the indigenous languages that were and are spoken in the Americas then as today, one realizes how this is sort of like this singular document, and it's so important because it's so singular. I work in the Huasteca, and I just met Gabriel, who is one of the students who was, oh, there you are, hi, who was introducing some of the speakers, and he's from the Huasteca, where I study. And so we have nothing of that sort for this region. And so we know very little about what the conquest meant. We have horrible stories that come down from a few Spanish sources, but we have nothing of that sort. And so just to highlight how important it is to think about this diversity and how difficult it is to do so, because we just don't have that information in many cases. But we should still try anyway, you know?
I would just make 2 points. First, don't accept the silences. Keep looking, keep digging. There's a lot that's encoded in the Florentine Codex, Book 12, but also don't just read Book 12. There is so much to be gained from the other books, 1 through 11, and in all of its complexity, in the images, in the Nahuatl text, in the metaphorical language, in the structure of the language, but also in the Spanish. I think there's so much that we can gain. But in addition, as a historian, I just want to give a shout out to the archives, which can also help us really understand the timing, the context, the struggles that indigenous peoples were undergoing at the very moment that the Florentine Codex was being produced.
Well, what always amazes me is the richness of the Florentine Codex. I think that is a major work of art and a major work of intellectual negotiation of Indo-Christian thought made by Sahagún and these Nahua scholars, and that we in this conference and in other ones, we see its potential to be always telling new things. I think also that all the approaches we do to these texts are translations. We translate the Spanish of Sahagún to us, the images to us, the Nahuatl text to nowadays, and that all the translations give light to certain points of this original and go dark, no? Obscure some others. So we are always going to be hiding something and lighting something about this book, and I think this work is going to be very, very important.
I want to say that I learned a lot from all of you today. We, as I mentioned before, I consider this book, the whole Florentine Codex, a miracle, because if we see all the vicissitudes, all the problems that it had to survive in that complex world, historical world, as Diana and I have commented before, this was made, and she put it very clearly today, it was made in the middle of a plague, when there were people dying for thousands, and still they continue working to finish this work. And here comes the point of the co-authorship of this, because it has been, in the past, we saw that, Sahagún and his helpers, no? No, it's Sahagún and his co-authors who really made the book possible, and more in those conditions, no? So then there are so many approaches, as Berenice also said, the richness of this material, and the many ways we can approach this book that basically made infinite the things we can study on this. I also like very much the idea that to listen a lecture in Nahuatl today. I don't know if it's the first time that there has been a lecture in Nahuatl in the Getty, but so that makes it even more spectacular. No? Because I don't imagine that has happened before, but it's the first one that I have heard one in this atmosphere. It reminds me of León-Portilla when he went to Paris to participate in the defenses of certain theses, and there were discussions in Nahuatl between him and his students there. So then the Nahuatl was heard also in Paris, no? Like it has been heard in Los Angeles today. And I would leave you with a question to all of us, no? After we saw all of these materials, very rich, presented by each of the persons in this panel, and we see the conquest told by the soldados indios que allí estaban presentes, as Sahagún says, no? The Indian soldiers who were telling the story, and also we have heard the Spanish stories. Well, the question I would leave to all of you is, and seeing this cooperation, this collaboration between these trilingual scholars of Tlatelolco with Sahagún, the question is, at the end, who really conquered whom? Okay? I will finish with that.
¿Tú sabes qué estamos haciendo? Como si tienes unas palabras, si el público se va hoy con una cosa, ¿con cuál idea se debería quedar?
¿Qué cosa se puede quedar?
Fuera de tu presentación, tal vez.
Bueno, pues más que nada quisiera compartir unas palabras que a veces duelen, no sé por ser indígena o por trabajar con mi lengua materna, pero quisiera más como espacios como esta institución que aportan o que incluyen a personas indígenas. Y sabemos que hay bastantes indígenas intelectuales que trabajan con la revitalización, proyectos con lenguas indígenas, pero lo están haciendo desde afuera, no lo están haciendo directamente con los pueblos. Desde que yo empecé a trabajar con la lengua, tuve esta visión de acercarme lo más que puedo con mi pueblo para realmente mostrarles que las lenguas indígenas tienen ese valor de riqueza cultural, que siempre existirán, aunque en el pasado existieron y se han venido distorsionando, pero siempre van a existir porque es la raíz de los pueblos originarios como indígenas. Y en mi caso realmente reconozco la institución que me haya brindado la oportunidad de estar aquí y más que la oportunidad pues de trabajar con ellos. Y hay otras instituciones como el Museo de la Universidad de Leiden, que también participé, y la inquietud del por qué estuve ahí es que me decían, bueno, manejas bastante bien las ceremonias y queremos que nos apoyes con una presentación y a ver cómo podemos trabajar, ¿no? Y luego me preguntan, Eduardo, ¿cómo te gustaría que incorporemos a la sociedad náhuatl desde aquí? Y me preguntan, no podemos pagar vuelos para que vengan a presenciar la exposición. Le dije, pero no buscamos un viaje, sino buscamos que dan a la luz estos artefactos coloniales o documentos que se han resguardado en instituciones, que salgan a la luz y que la gente los valore. Y creo que eso realmente animaría a la gente actual indígena a valorar nuevamente lo que ya hay o lo que se ha perdido y que se quiere dar a la luz. Entonces, el proyecto que estamos haciendo ahí con ellos, con los pueblos de Tecomate y con el Museo de Leiden, es que va a haber videoconferencias cuando se abre la exposición. Entonces, nativohablantes tendrán la oportunidad de realmente presenciar una exposición a través de la videoconferencia, y en el pueblo donde nosotros estamos trabajando en Tecomate, pues ya contamos casi con la red, con el internet, ¿no? Con las redes sociales. Entonces, para mí es un privilegio dar a conocer y conectar investigadores académicos con pueblos indígenas. No quiero decir que solo estamos trabajando afuera, aunque estamos trabajando a lo lejos, pero sí estamos presentes, enfocarnos hacia el pueblo originario, y es lo que estamos haciendo y es lo que está haciendo también el instituto, ¿no? Con estos resúmenes que jamás me imaginé jóvenes indígenas leyeran estas partes, estos pasajes de la conquista, y realmente creo que hay bastantes instituciones sin fines de lucro o académicos que realmente les interesan participar en estos eventos, de conectarse realmente con pueblos originarios. No solo hablo de la lengua náhuatl, hay ya ejemplos de maya, conozco gente trabajando también, pero son grupos muy minoritarios realmente que se entregan a la lengua. Como dije hace rato, hay bastantes académicos intelectuales náhuatl que están trabajando con la lengua, escritores, pero están haciendo sus presentaciones pues en las universidades, en grandes instituciones. Pero el año pasado tuvimos la fortuna de invitar a algunos investigadores. Hicimos la primera presentación en lengua materna en Tecomate y asistió bastante gente, casi la mayoría de la comunidad y otras comunidades. Y la participación entre investigadores y nativohablantes, las preguntas las hicieron en lengua materna. Realmente eso fue algo maravilloso que apenas está abriendo. Entonces, si realmente queremos trabajar, pues sería de esa forma, ir viendo cosas hacia el futuro, incorporando a pueblos originarios. Gracias.
I took some notes. Eduardo started by saying that he was going to say some words that hurt, and he doesn't know exactly why they hurt, but he says that he wishes that there were more spaces like these that were inclusive of indigenous people, that there are enough indigenous intellectuals out there to do this work, not just from the outside, but within, working together with communities. He says that there is so much cultural richness that has always existed. These are the roots of indigenous thought, and these are the very things that we're studying now. He made a point. He said, how can we include the Nahuatl community? And he talked about an experience where an exhibition was going to open, and the people from the institution said, we can't pay for people's plane tickets. And he said, we're not looking for a plane ticket. We're looking to be valued as Native people. We're looking to be valued for our culture. We're not just looking for a momentary response, but rather, he said, we're looking for other ways in which to be inclusive. So he says that one of the products, or one of the results, was video conferencing, so that when a new exhibit opens in the Institute in Leiden, they will have a way to connect the institution to the community, so that the community can see their material culture and how it's being represented in other spaces. And then he went on to talk about a conference that he held in Veracruz, where the scholars were having direct conversations with the community, and how rich that was, and how he knows that these types of studies and this type of work is happening, but not enough of it. So he hopes that moving forward, we will do whatever we can from our spaces, like this platform, for example, where we are more inclusive and where we are thinking of the communities that we're studying as partners. Thank you. I want to say a final thank you to everyone who came, to all the organizers. I want to finish off by thanking all of the indigenous communities whose resilience we continue to marvel at. And I hope that every single one of us has taken at least one tiny little thing today, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
I'm on your program as the last speaker of the day. And you know what that means? I'm the person standing between you and the reception out in front of the Harold Williams. But I want to end with a few closing thoughts about today. And about a week ago, I was at the Escorial in Spain, where every bit of the contents, who knows what indigenous treasures, were burned in the 17th century. And then again in 1731, all of the treasures of the indigenous world that were in Madrid were burned. I want to thank the Laurentian Library for having been such an amazing steward that we have a thing like the Florentine Codex. Thank you, Florence. Things die, things get lost. One of the things that has also been on my mind today is that we talk about extinction. We worry about, and I worry about, the 3 billion birds that have vanished from the United States in the past decade. But I am also worried about the death of languages, and that even as we make the Florentine Codex so much more available as a digital entity, to recognize that there are indigenous languages that are not represented online in the same way, that are not thriving. I'm also, as an art historian, I just have to say that the third text, I think, has been the third rail, the source of electricity that has run through the 16th century. It's especially rich and productive to think of how the text and the image come together. There have been references made today, perhaps it was Lisa who said that, you know, there have been times when historians, so wedded to the text as the only evidence that could be brought to the table, have been a little dismissive of the image. I have to say that I found a kind of irreverent joy a few years ago in reading the commentary to the 1983 edition of the Lienzo de Tlaxcala, in which it said all those pictures in which Malintzin appears, she's irrelevant. They just stuck her into every picture. Why on earth would she have any reason to be there? Stuff like that is delicious, but tells us the power of the visual narrative. I think the 21st century turn to the visual, which is being made possible by digital technology, has increased the capacity to make it necessary to encompass the third rail of the image. I've learned from a lot of things today: linguistics, close reading, adventurous and surprising comparisons. I've learned about a century of destruction, but embedded within it, hope for the future. Tzilikatzin, a giant. We began our day with familiar giants. Take away his name, a new giant that should always be in our firmament of those larger than life. And I've thought a lot about the 12 books of the Florentine Codex, the most complete record of the things of New Spain, a general history, the title says. Sahagún and his co-authors wrangling so many distinct voices. But take a look mentally right now. This is not the Florentine you're looking at. Take a look at mentally the pictures you've been looking at today. Did you see a single blot, a single mistake, a single error that someone tried to correct? It tells us something about the confidence with which that story was told. To be continued.